Hello and welcome to another round of MTGA tasting notes. This is kind of a quirky one to get into because 2015 was a vintage that had its challenges. This was right in the middle of a number of drought seasons that we had been experiencing. And to throw us a kicker, as Mother Nature loves to do, in 2015, the bloom and kind of pollination process was longer than it should have been. Typically when these vines are being pollinated, it takes like a couple of days. It's a pretty quick and easygoing process as long as it doesn't get too windy, as long as it doesn't get too cold. But guess what happened? Both of those things. So with the weather taking a shift as this bloom and this pollination was going on, that process was extended from maybe a couple of days to maybe a week and a half. And with that, we had a lot of what we call shatter out in the vineyard. And what shatter is that it's basically a lack of pollination in very sparsely populated clusters. So typically you think of like a cluster of grapes, it's this nice kind of full bunch of grapes, right? Well, in 2015, that wasn't the case. There were definitely like spots and like gaps within those clusters because some of those flowers simply didn't pollinate and we had less fruit to go around. Some of the vineyards that we work with were down anywhere from about 20 up to 60% in overall yields. So while 2015 has some really yummy wine coming out of it, there's very little of it to go around. And whether it was our Merlot, like we have in front of us here, or even some of our other wines from 2015, all of them were affected. Now, we were still able to make about probably 150 cases of our Merlot in 2015. It was still 100% Merlot, still aged it in about, I wanna say it was like somewhere between 20 and 30% new French oak barrels that year. Aged for about 2 full years in barrel and then another year in bottle, kind of as is tradition. It's very much kind of stylistically what I think our Merlot needs. And then once we have that full, almost 3 years worth of aging, that's when we release it out into the world. So the way our 2015 has just been solid. It definitely has a little bit more pop and a little bit more intensity because of those lower yields. That's kind of the upside to lower yielding years, is that the vines are able to put a lot more energy into the fruit that remains on those vines. So we don't have to go through and do any thinning. We're basically able to let the vines kind of do their thing and not have to worry about them being overcropped. That was definitely not an issue. The vines were definitely undercropped. But the resulting wines were very concentrated, very intense, and I think 15 really had this big kind of pop of flavor. I'd say it was very comparable to our 2013 vintage. Like those kind of odd years really seem to be very similar when in the winemaking process, as well as how they've aged and what they've become as the years have gone on. And that's exactly it. You compare this to, say, the 2014, the 14's a little bit more, I guess linear is probably the right word. It has this great body and great structure to it. The 2016 on the other side has a little bit more kind of richness. It's very big but silky and very smooth. The 15 just has this pop, like it's right in your face, like right away. Still very smooth and approachable. It's not something that is edgy necessarily, but it just, if you taste those wines kind of side by side and knowing in my brain kind of where those other vintages play, this one is just unique in that sense that it just kind of comes right out of the gate at you. It's definitely a little bigger, a little richer, I would say, than prior vintages, but that richness has this really bright core to it that just kind of jumps out of the glass at you. That's both, as you smell it and especially as you taste it. The nose is really nice and like rich. You get a little bit of that caramel, a little bit of that toffee going on in there from the barrel aging. And it has a little bit more of like that blackberry, like black cherry kind of thing going on in the nose. And there's a little bit more tannin. It's a little bit drier kind of around. It feels like it just kind of reaches out and grabs you a little bit more, which is definitely what I would expect from that vintage. A little bit more extraction, just a little bit more, yeah, pop. Pop is probably the adjective to describe our 2015 Merlot. It is just got that great little oomph, extra oomph to it that makes it unique compared to some of the other vintages around it. But man, if you taste like our 2014 and then this, you're like, okay, like these are definitely related. These are very similar. The 15 just has a little bit more of that pop, that reach out and grab you, where something like the 14 or the 16 around it are a little bit more just easy going, a little bit more just silky and kind of rich and smooth. This has definitely that reach out and grab you kind of vibe to it. In a really, really good spot. 2015 was, gosh, that was my 6th vintage already. We started adding on Pinot Noir that year as well. We had been making white wine for a little bit of time by that point as well. Man, 15 was kind of a fun vintage. A lot kind of evolved with the MTGA program, with the addition of Pinot Noir in particular. And it's a year that we grew quite a bit in our overall production. So very happy with where the 2015 ended up and how it's tasting these days. Definitely a wine that if you hang on to it for 5, 10, 15, maybe even more years, you're gonna be doing just fine with it.